Hi, welcome to the Right People, Right Places podcast. I'm your host, Raul Mendoza, and I have the absolute pleasure of having Rick Czaplewski join us here for a conversation about negotiation. I had, I was actually in a session where, with a few other executives, where he led it, and I found it so memorable, so helpful in so many ways, and just thought to myself, I'd love to have Rick on to be able to share his story and share his frameworks and his insights on negotiation, and prepare to be inspired, prepare to come away with tools that you can put into practice right away. So without further ado, welcome, Rick.
Hey, thanks for having me, Raul.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, let's dive in here. I'd love to start in the place of just your story. And, I think one of the things that I enjoyed most about how you shared is it was such a visceral experience, just hearing your story of how you negotiated through life and also how you negotiate through business. And I'd love for our audience to kind of get a sense and a flavor for that here as we get started.
Yeah, happy to tell you a little bit about it and how I got started on this negotiations journey. So I was in college. My story started. I had cancer in college. I had it twice. I made it. I was a junior the second time I had it. So I had about 2 more years of college before I went into the workforce. I was a CPA. I had an accounting degree, and I joined a large accounting firm called KPMG. So I was servicing a lot of clients, and as somebody in their early 20s, I was dealing with executives and higher level people than I guess I normally would if I hadn't been in a client facing business like that, like public accounting.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found was I would audit companies' books and I'd say, "Hey, I got some ideas for you. If you make this change or you do this, you can improve your financial position." And they'd say, "Oh, that's great. Thanks, Rick. These are great ideas. We'll mark those down." And it was a good conversation. And then I would step away, go to the next client, and 12 months later, I'd be back and I'd say, "Hey, how'd that list go?" And time again, Raul, they'd say, "Yeah, we didn't do that. No, we didn't touch that." And I was like, "Well, why?" And that was like a real light for me. And having a job like this was tough. Like when you work for a big four accounting firm, that's some high stress, high power stuff. And coming off of
Mm-hmm.
cancer, the HR group, this was the early 90s. There really wasn't a lot of support at the time. So it's kind of like juggling
Mm-hmm.
all these things at once. But I realized that despite being in those rooms in my position, I was not able to set the agenda or to create strategic direction and have an impact. I ended
Mm-hmm.
up leaving accounting. I got an MBA, and I always went into operations jobs or positions where if my action would create a reaction on the financials. If I did this, it would save this, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
I grew revenue and it would, impact the P&L. And I really like that cause and effect piece of operations, and that led
Mm-hmm.
me to negotiations. I think a lot of business leaders are looking for major investments, process changes, overhauls, restructurings, but an investment in negotiation skills means you can continue your business as it's working today, but enhance its performance because people have the skills to put you in a better position to get better results. And that's really where my love for negotiations took off, was to be in several different types of roles from that point on, where my negotiation skills immediately impacted business. So if you're a practitioner and you're like, well, how do I
Yeah.
get ahead? How do I differentiate myself? Negotiation is a great way to do that because you're putting your relationships and results into focus versus you're distracted with something that's maybe more um, um, what's the right word, bureaucratic or too deep in the details or what have you. Negotiations can differentiate you because you can make measurable gains on your position, based on how you're doing it.
I love it. I love how you painted that picture there. I think, one of the things that I push on this podcast is relationship. And I think the way you shared that definition of negotiations from your own experience and how that can improve outcomes, I think it's an incredible way of starting here, because it does come down to relationship. It does come down to understanding your position within a relationship and presenting information, not in a way to try to get away with something. I think sometimes what happens with negotiations is people, they think of the hard hitting sales guy or gal that's just trying to close the deal. But I love how you said within what you explained, position. It's about understanding your position and understanding the position of the person that's before you, and being able to come up with or agree upon an outcome that is mutually beneficial.
That works. Correct. Yeah. It's interesting in Hollywood, Raul, you see negotiations like Jordan Belfort, or even in like the recent Disney release Andor, director
Mm-hmm.
Krennic really struck me as someone who's always negotiating solely for results, hammering tables, creating, stress. But what I like to emphasize to my classes is negotiation is not just about getting a result, it's about producing a better business relationship. And in the industry that you're in placement and in recruiting and
Yes.
HR, that's critical. Relationships are absolutely critical to having a successful business and happy both clients and candidates. So that's really a major topic to think about as a negotiator.
Absolutely. And I'm excited to get into it here with you. And I think one of the things with recruiting and business is it's the most successful people I think in business. It's about getting that result and that mutually beneficial outcome, but it's personal, right? There's an element that's personal. We're taking this personal, and we want to win, not just for our own personal gain, but also because we want to have a mutually beneficial outcome. So I think that's with that said, I love for you to share a little bit about your story of how you just kind of some of the personal side here of how you've negotiated in life, and seen some challenges yourself and how that's fueled your passion for negotiation.
The toughest negotiation I ever had was involved my personal life. I was a junior in college. I was diagnosed with cancer for the second time. And this was a problem because my odds were lower, and the first time I went through it I had radiation. The second time I had to drop out of college and move in with my parents and get chemotherapy. Nobody who's 20 years old wants to do this, and it's a tough situation. And I have my personal opinion is if something bad happens to you in life, like all of the other stuff, like the minor stuff should just open up and be like a glide path to you're dealing with whatever issue you have. But as you know, life doesn't
Mm-hmm.
work that way. You've got to work for it. So I needed to
Mm-hmm.
negotiate three things. I needed to negotiate dropping out of college. And in the early 90s, I wanted to take a couple correspondence courses, which back then, those are not very common. Nobody really did that. They were all paper, and it's
Mm-hmm.
nothing like it is today. And then the third thing I needed to negotiate was to be readmitted to college if I lived.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember walking to the dean of students office, and I sat down from her and I ran through my three things, and hey, I've got cancer and I want to do these things. And I mean, she's shocked, and like her eyes and hair are like blown back. And she said, "You know what? No problem. No, number one and number three, boom, right there. She signed the paper. You can leave and come back, no problem. But number two is going to be something that has to be approved by a dean of the business college, somebody else's office." And she gave me a piece
Mm-hmm.
of paper and said, "You're going to have to get this signed by him." And I thought, oh, this stinks. This guy was tough, right? He's one of those
Mm-hmm.
people that students didn't really talk to him. I don't even think he taught classes. there's never anyone in his office. He was just like this intimidating, menacing, like figurehead guy. And I'm like, oh God, I gotta deal with this. So I grabbed the paper and I said, okay. I walked out, walked right over to his office. No surprise, there was nobody in it. And I handed him the paper, and he took the paper. I said, "Sir, I have cancer, and I need to leave college, and I want to take correspondence courses while I'm working. I want to work towards my degree while I'm going through treatments." And he said, "Well, is there any description or anything I can look at to see what this is about?" I said, "Yeah." So I handed him the paper. Can't approve this. I'm like, what? So I took my paper and I walked into the hallway. You know who I found in the hallway?
Who's that?
Nobody. Yeah, no one. There's no one there. It's just me. And that's where I thought to myself, you know what? Not today. I'm going to stick up for myself. Something's at stake here. And I have cancer. There's no way I should be not denied this. I didn't care if this guy was in his 50s and I was 20. I didn't care if he was a senior administrator and I was just another student. And I didn't care if he was the only person who could make this happen, and I had no leverage. I walked back in there and he said, "Oh, well, you're back." I said, "Yeah, I am." And I said, I think this is not the outcome we both want here. Can you reconsider? Because in 3 months, I might be dead. Can you make an exception in this case for me? And he said, well, yes, I can. And he signed my form. So I went back to the dean of students' office about 15 minutes after I had left her office. I handed her the paper, and she was shocked again because she didn't think I could pull it off. She didn't think I was going to do it. And he did. And to me, that incident is, I reflect on that a lot, because a lot of times in negotiation, the chips are totally down. You're nervous. You're scared. You're dealing with someone who's intimidating, but it's that unwillingness to back down. And when I think about what was at stake for me at the time, taking those courses and having that mental break and steering my mind away from going through treatment was definitely a big part of healing. And one of the reasons that I made it was because I fought for that. And I got to do those two courses. And that's where I talk to, you and I met in an executive audience, but when I talk to younger practitioners, what's at stake for you?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What's on the table? Like, what are you walking away from simply because this is going to be a tough situation? Turn around, walk into the office, and face that person on the other side and just have a calm conversation and get what you need. Because if you don't, in my case, if I didn't get that, I don't know where I would be. It was critical. So I like to tell folks about that. It's really important. We can talk about, the techniques and everything, but it comes down to that, asking yourself that question, what's on the table for me? Where could I be with negotiation? What's really at stake? Yeah, that's what I think.
I love it. Absolutely love what you're saying. Even just hearing that story again, it hits in such a deep place, I think. And I think, it's interesting because the truth is, for any one of us, whether it's, your situation is very clear, right? It was very clear that you were in a life or death situation. And, but the truth is, all of us are, if you really take a step back and think, we don't know what tomorrow brings. We don't know what the next day brings. We can't just assume that it's going to be there for us. And I think having this mentality that says, look, what's at stake here? And asking that question, what's at stake here? And making it personal to your situation and your circumstances. that causes you to face that fear, that rejection in a way that you wouldn't otherwise. And that's why I so appreciate that story, because as much as it's unique to you, it's also very experientially everyone's positioning as well. It's like we're all in that place. It's look, whether we believe it or not, we don't know what tomorrow brings. So what are you going to do to fight for what you want in that situation, and come to a mutually beneficial
Yeah.
outcome. And so anyway, thank you again for sharing that. And I know that our audience is going to get a tremendous amount from that. And I mean, we've already kind of with that, you share about negotiating in
Well,
life, and oh, go right ahead.
yeah, I was going to say, how many times are you thrust into a difficult conversation by surprise? Like for me, when I think about what happened there, I didn't know when I left my room to negotiate with the dean of students, I had no idea I was going to be doing that negotiation. All of a sudden, I'm doing it, right? And that's where when I think
Right.
about strategy and grit and resolve and process, having that background in negotiation as a plan, as some training to fall back on is critical. So you're not just, oh my God, I'm in a situation and now I'm fighting for my life and I'm winging it. It's how do I put those pieces together? And there's nothing probably more difficult than being asked a question in an interview, or maybe you're out in the public and something takes you by surprise and you're like, I didn't expect this. What do I do? Right.
Right.
And when there's like something at risk, when there's something at stake, having a process and having some confidence going into it, that's where I think this discipline of negotiation is important, because it's good training for those surprise moments that we all have.
Yes.
So
Absolutely. And again, so valuable in so many ways for my audience, in that, a lot of my audience are candidates looking for work, are HR practitioners, are executives in that people leadership space. Or so I think there's so much negotiating that happens within that, and you're taken by surprise, whether you're an HR leader, whether you're a recruiter. You can't anticipate everything that's going to come at you. You can't anticipate when there's a counter offer that comes your way. Um, for a candidate, you can't anticipate that one question that recruiter might ask you, or that hiring manager might ask
yeah.
you, where you're like, you're, you're, you caught you unprepared and just kind of in your tracks. What do you do? And I think that's
Mhm.
where this type of, the intentionality. So we're not found in a situation where, you know, you're in a place where I don't know what to do. It's like, what can I do? And being in that rhythm. I know coming away from your session, I was able to come away with tools where I'm always thinking about how to refine and how to approach the situation based on the frameworks you provided me and the team that I was with. So, but fantastic. Appreciate you sharing that. Um, you talked about negotiating in life and business there, the mindset, which is one of what's at stake here, asking that question, making it personal to you, but then not leaving it there. And I think now we're kind of heading into the territory of talking about some of these. You talked about your first and most difficult negotiation, but let's talk about negotiation frameworks to kind of contextualize what we're talking about here. One of the things that you shared in our session was neuroeconomics and just the psychology, and I found it so helpful in kind of approaching different situations to have that backdrop. So I'd love for our audience to hear about that.
Yeah. Well, there's two great topics that are here. So let's start with the framework itself, which is not neuroeconomics. Neuroeconomics
Yes.
is more of a tactic, but the framework is more of your approach to the overall strategy. So as a negotiations trainer, I ask a lot of people,
Mhm.
what do you think of when I say the word negotiation? What do you think of, Raul? When I say
Mm.
that word?
When I think of negotiation, the first thing that comes to my mind is closing a deal.
Yeah, right. It's that's a very common type of answer. So a lot of folks, and if you're listening to this, you're probably thinking, well, haggling or bargaining, or I'm at the table, or conflict.
Yeah.
That's a very common answer when I ask, what do you think of when I say that word, but I want I want people who I work with to look at negotiation as a much more holistic and involved activity than you're just sitting down and you're going at it. It starts with
Right.
your outcome that you're seeking. What are you looking for? What is the result and the relationship you're looking for? Like as an HR leader, you might say, I'm looking to hire a project engineer and at this salary and this benefits package. That's a
Mm-hmm.
result. But if you think of that
Mm-hmm.
also as relationship, I want somebody coming through this process. And if you're a talent group like Rapido, you want people who are walking through that process going, you know what, that was a smooth process. The recruiter treated me honestly and treated me well. And I'm excited to work for XYZ company. That's a relationship because if you don't take care of
Yes.
both sides of that equation, you're missing out on you're only having transactional negotiations, and that's not all right. You have to have the full picture. So that's your outcome, the relationship and result that you're seeking. And then we build it up from there. So whatever my one of my other fun questions that I like to ask is if I do business with you, Raul, if you and I do business together, what is the
Mm-hmm.
one word that describes your personal strategy or your company's the way your company does business? What word would you use?
The word that I would use is partnership.
Partnership. That's a great one. A lot of times when I ask that question, I get relational type of answers like partnerships,
Mm-hmm.
integrity,
Mm-hmm.
trust, honesty, relationships, right? That's great. People who are that type of business
Mm-hmm.
person are doing excellent. But one time, and I'm not kidding here, one time I asked that question like what is the what's the one way that you would describe how you do business? Somebody said tooth and nail. Tooth and nail? Like what? So whatever you answer to that question, and you said partnerships, whatever you're putting out
Mm,
there as a practitioner, you're getting back. So if you're a tooth and nail guy, that's what's coming back to you. If you're integrity
that's right.
relationships, you've got other people who want, right? So that's how you're setting the table. That's how you're creating your negotiation environment, which is the next step. Creating a negotiation environment means you're cultivating those relationships with people that you have to negotiate with. So for your business, you'd be
Mm,
negotiating with clients, different
yes,
companies. Hey, we really like doing business with Rapido. They're responsive, they're easy to do business with, they're nice people. That is critical because if you're not that way, if you're difficult to do business with or they don't like you, highly unlikely you're going to be around or get what you want in a negotiation. So that environment is critical. From there, we go into
absolutely.
preparation. Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
It's then we talk about preparation. The quantitative and qualitative way of gearing up for a negotiation. There's no negotiation without preparation. Period. There's no knee jerk or off the cuff negotiations. And then from there, finally, after we do all those things, now we sit down and bargain. Now we put together those
Mm-hmm.
tactics that'll get us to where we go. And then when we're done, another step that a lot of folks skip is closure.
Mm,
Imagine you tell a client or you tell a candidate that, hey, good news, they want to hire you. Um, this is your dream company. I think this is a great salary and benefits. And then you never send an offer letter. And they're like, well, oh, we had something here, right? That's a lot of folks in different corners of business forget to close it out. They're so excited they got an agreement that they just burn to the next thing, and then invariably it falls
right.
apart down the road. So always close. Those are the steps in the negotiation framework to make you successful at getting the outcome that you're looking for.
Fantastic. So helpful. I think in so many ways. I think the planning piece is huge. I think so often we can go into these things thinking, okay, we're going to have a conversation, but to be planning accordingly and in such a way that you're ready to close. Like if you have a plan going in, you never know what the outcome's going to be, but if you have a plan going in and know what it is that you're looking for an ideal outcome to be, then you can expect that and have that be what you aim for, right? So I think that's one of the big pieces that I came away with is just that intentionality.
Yes, intentionality is a great word. If you're ambushing your negotiation counterparts, highly unlikely you're going to be successful. Setting aside time and having a plan going into it means you're going to be more successful at getting good outcomes. And your counterpart will be equally as successful because you're doing it in an intentional, dedicated manner versus you're trying to surprise, Friday at 4:30 I'm calling, like that just doesn't work. Um,
Right.
yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, with that said, we described the environment and kind of the space that we're dealing with here and what you just shared. Now, what's next?
Well, you mentioned neuroeconomics. Should we take a look at
Hmm.
that?
Absolutely. Let's
Yeah.
go for it.
All right. So, neuroeconomics are principles of behavioral psychology, behavioral economics, and there's a lot of different books on negotiation and behavioral economics that really make interactions with people easier. And there's a lot of different law enforcement negotiators out there who talk about behavioral psychology principles based on what they learned through like FBI training. And my takeaway on
Hmm.
stuff like that is that it's so interesting and effective. But as a trainer and as somebody who's in business, without, several months of intense FBI training or on the job work with that type of person, we're not in business, we're not negotiating with criminals, we're negotiating with highly intelligent, driven people. So it's like, how do I
Right.
bridge that those two things, those types of principles with business? And I came up with some steps. It starts with priming. Priming is a
Hmm.
great way to get into any conversation. And priming basically means you want to start on a positive note, or you want to have the person that you're working with in a good mindset when you're talking to them. So words like, hey, good news, I've got a way through this. Good news, I thought of something I think is going to work for both of us. Right? If I say that to you, it sounds you'd be pretty receptive, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like, okay, I'm already
Yeah.
feeling good hearing that. Good news. It's like, okay, let's hear it.
Yeah, now that's not the only way to get into it, but use a derivative of that. Now, let's contrast that with this one. Raul, we've got to talk. Or how about this other one? You're not going to like what I have to say here. Right? Now you've got the person's guard goes up, right? They're
Yes.
they're like, what's coming? I'm on defense.
Yep.
I got no matter what you say, I'm not going to like it, so I'm already ready to go and you haven't even said what it is. So prime your way into situations positively. The next is framing. And I always think of
Hmm.
framing like your favorite cooking spice. Let's just use salt, for example. So if you have a really nice steak, you put it on the grill and you add a little bit of salt to it, oh, it tastes so good. But if you dump the entire container of salt on the steak and then eat it, you're like, ugh,
Ugh.
this tastes nasty. That's framing. That's framing. You want to use framing like you use salt or spice in cooking. Just a little bit does it. And framing is
Hmm.
reiterative language that when you're describing your deal, it's good deal. Like Raul, isn't this podcast going great? I'm really enjoying this. This is an excellent conversation. Just that is some framing of how we're doing here in this podcast. And you can do that when you're negotiating. Like, yeah, I know this is, this, I think this is a deal that we can both work with. My boss might be kind of mad at me, but I can get through this. I know this should work. Use that kind of reiterative language, but don't overdo it.
Yes.
Um, the next step is anchoring, and there's a lot of literature about anchoring, not only
Hmm.
quantitatively but behaviorally anchoring. My
Hmm.
my favorite anchoring story came when I was buying counterfeit watches in Asia. I don't know if I told you this story.
Yes, I love it.
Really? You want to hear this one?
Oh, let's hear it again. I
You
love
want to
it.
hear it? Okay, okay. So I did a lot of business in Asia, and I enjoyed buying counterfeit watches like Folexes and Fomegas and those kinds of things. And the first time I went in there, I pointed to a watch in the case, pulled it out, looked at it, and I said, "Okay, I'll buy it." And the shop clerk, he types in 1,000 into a calculator, as in 1,000 US dollars for a fake watch. That's absurd. Like, you got to be kidding me.
Right.
So we went, we're typing numbers in this thing and we're going back and forth. I ended up paying $50. So I take the watch, I show it to some folks who were working for the company that I was managing. And the VP of procurement is like, ha ha ha, you got ripped off. Ha ha, you're a foreigner. You should only be paying $30. And I thought, this guy took me. Man, I feel bad. So the second time I went in for a watch, I thought, all right, I'm going to get smart here. I picked out, I got smart before going to his place. I went online and I printed off a specific watch that I wanted. He didn't have it with him, so he had to go and get it out of the warehouse, wherever that was. So he gave this thing to a runner, and now I'm standing alone in his store. And it was a long wait, like about 45 minutes. And while I was there, these 3 foreign tourists walk in, and they did the same thing I did. They picked out a watch. They said, okay. He types in $1,000 into the calculator. They go back and forth. They paid 500 US dollars. That is the power of anchoring. So now, if he would have anchored me at 200, he probably would have got me at 50. Yep. He anchors them at 200. He leaves $300 on the table. So when you do an anchor, punchline of the story is when my watch came back, we went back and forth. I refused to budge, and I bought it for 25. So
there we go.
Right. So, yeah, I knew it was coming. So, and he was not pleased to do it, but we did it. So when you anchor, when you receive numbers from a different party, think of those as anchors. And even writing a number down on the wall, like a number on a whiteboard in a conference room or on a monitor when you walk in, that is an anchor. That's powerful enough in the mind to trigger someone to lean towards where you're trying to steer the conversation. And that's where terms like never split the difference come from, which means I'm going to set an absurdly high $1,000 fake watch anchor. Oh, okay. Well, I'll just, I can't do that, but let's just, we'll cut it in half. And it's absurd when you can buy that same watch for $25 and somebody paid 20 times that. So that's what anchoring is. It's setting a target that's above where you want to land. And it's also it's also your awareness that numbers and behaviors coming in are artificially high. Do not fall for insufficient adjustment, the 2 worst words in negotiation.
Totally. So helpful.
Yeah. I got 2 more for you if you're interested.
Let's keep going. I love your use of priming and throughout this example. I love it.
That's called a nudge, what I just did right there, if you're interested.
Okay.
Yeah, it's called a nudge. We're going to talk about that in 1 second. Your next thing is risk aversion. So, we're risk averse people, right? Humans are risk averse. We don't drive like 300 miles an hour on the freeway. We don't put our entire paycheck on a roulette wheel or the craps table. Most of us don't. That's just who we are as people. We're risk averse. We don't want to deal with that, all in mentality. So when you're negotiating, if you start to highlight risk, that is a very powerful tool of influence. So like, for example, all right, I got good news. I talked to my manager. Boy, it was tough to get this through him. He approved this salary at 120. Now, I know you asked for 130, but we're at 120. We definitely came up from our 100K offer. I'm afraid, if you're not able to take this, I'm afraid it's going to disappear. That's introducing risk aversion at the end. I'm afraid that we're not going to be able to get, I don't think I can get this approved with him, but I met you 2/3 of the way towards your target. I think that's a pretty good deal. You can hear that language I'm using. I'm using the language of anchoring, of framing, of priming, and I'm also introducing some risk in this. So when you think of it that way, that's how you start to get somebody thinking, well, hey, I put a lot into this interview too, and that's where you want that person starting to work towards you. And then finally, using this exact same example, the next step is to make it easy. This is the nudge. Just
Mm,
make it easy. So, hey, good news. We were able to close that gap. I know we started at 100. You wanted 130. We're at 120. Um, Man, it was a tough deal to get that approved by this company, but I went to bat for you, and um, they're cool with it. I think we're excited to have you. You know, if you want to go
mhm.
more, well, I'm a little nervous it's going to disappear. And now here's make it easy. I've got the offer letter ready to go. It's in your inbox. All I need you to do is sign it, and hey, we're ready to rock and roll, and we'll be feeling good about this. That last step is critical because if you make it easy, you don't subject yourself to something unwinding later. Where now, if you had that same discussion where you're like,
Mhm.
well, I got 120 approved by the HR manager, but you know, it's got to go back to a vice president and then the CEO and then a committee. And all right, well, now that's not easy anymore. And that person might be, you know, saying, all right, I want 130. I really like that company at 120, but this is a headache. This is a lot of bureaucracy. I don't want to deal with this. I'm going to go somewhere else. Right? That's making it easy is also a very strong technique. Um, yeah, and when you're in talent development or talent management and you're placing folks, if you're in the HR space, you know, when you pit corporate America versus a candidate, what I feel is your best negotiation strategy as a hiring body is you want people
Mhm.
coming in who are A, qualified, and B, good cultural fits, and someone who
Yes.
passed those tests and checks those boxes. And but I think another area where I don't feel is strongly
Hmm.
emphasized is you want those people coming in stoked to work for you. I can't wait
Yes.
to work for Rapido. Boy, that Raul
Yes.
guy, he was great. I can't wait to join this company versus, all right, they gave me an offer at 100. I asked for 105. They couldn't do it. They're stuck on 2 weeks of vacation, you know, and they told me about all these
Yeah.
salary bands. And, you know, like that's not somebody excited to work with you. You want the person who you're hiring to win a little bit. They don't have to win, like they don't have to get everything they ask for. But if they work a
Yeah.
little bit to negotiate with you and you give to them, they're going to be a lot more pleased coming in the door versus, all right, well, I guess I'll take this job. They didn't really work with me. And I used to have 4 weeks of vacation. Now I'm down to two, and I'll work here 6 months or a year, and then we'll move on. Right? Like you don't. That might be a
Yes.
transactional win, but that's not a long term relational win. So think like when you close deals like that. Sometimes it's tempting to just close at $2,000 as a recruiter doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of like getting a commission, but $2,000 to a candidate could be a material
Yes.
difference between I'm really excited to be here or I don't care. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
I think that's a
Absolutely.
best practice.
Love this. I love this. Priming, framing, anchoring, loss aversion, making it easy. I think I love this on so many levels. I think even from a candidate, I'll speak from the candidate perspective right now because I think that, right now there's so many displaced talent, a lot of great talent on the market, and it can feel, well, first of all, you're at a disadvantage because there's so many people that are displaced right now, and they can feel in a situation where they're backed into a corner. And this is where I love what we're providing here is tools of negotiation. It's like you can recognize your position, recognize the position of the company, and from there work into what you want. Obviously as a recruiter, um, these things benefit me also as an HR leader or practitioner. There's elements of this that I think you can put into practice because it's just human nature. It's human behavior. It's understanding those dynamics. But I think I want to highlight the candidate component here because, you know, it's as simple as being able to prime conversations and having and making it a positive experience. But actually, a candidate can prime a conversation with a recruiter or a hiring manager by saying, "I am so excited to be speaking with you and just showing that enthusiasm. And, I think
Yeah.
being able to anchor right out the gate, frame it and anchor it in the conversation in a way of where you want it to go, and that requires a candidate to really understand where they're at and what they want, so it's like coming to terms with this. But I think what I love about this is, um, and then being able to share your skills and abilities and how that could, hey, there aren't a
Hmm.
lot of people with this type of experience in the market right now. There are a lot of people that are CPAs but don't have financial auditing experience per se, so being able to say that and knowing what you're worth, and making it easy for a recruiter or hiring manager to take the next step. You know what I mean? I think there's so much here that can translate into the candidate experience, the recruiter experience, and the HR practitioner experience, where they can take these pieces and really help get to a mutually beneficial outcome. So thanks for sharing that. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to comment with this.
Yeah, I think in this type of transaction in this industry where you're hiring, think about it as building a bigger pie or adding complexity, adding elements to the offer to
Mm,
make both parties come up with a more viable solution. So one of the toughest things as a candidate to hear from a recruiter is, what's your salary? What do you want to
mm-hmm,
make? Well, okay, if I say 100, that might be great. Hey, this guy's a bargain. Well, maybe I say 125. Oh, he just priced. You know what? We don't want to talk to you. That is a
right.
really tough on candidates to do that. And I don't necessarily have a good answer for where should a candidate position themselves, but I think they should do some basic research and try to figure out, all right, the market value of a project engineer, of an accounting manager, or whatever, is X in Milwaukee
Mm-hmm,
or Chicago or wherever around the country. And instead of coming up with a number, say, all right, I did my research. I'm looking for this type of job. And when I look on third party reporting information, this is the type of salary that role is offering. I would expect you guys to be close to market. Can I count on that? And
mm-hmm,
try to approach it like, don't dig yourself into a hole right out of the bat. And then
right.
the next thing is, as you work your way through an offer and through, you're coming together with a company, this is a place as a candidate you want to work, have like 10 or 15 different ideas of what you would accept to take the offer. So if you're dead set on 125 grand, but
Mm-hmm,
the salary is only 115, but they're going to let you work Monday and Friday from home, that's going to save you on childcare, on commuting, on clothing, on food, on a lot of
mm-hmm,
stuff. So you may not get the top line salary, but you also don't get the expense of dealing with that type of
right.
cost as well. So think about like those, it's a good practice, I would say, to Google hiring packages or review like different elements of an offer and come up with, all right, if you're not willing to give me my salary requirement, I understand, but there's a couple other things that won't cost you anything, like working from
Mm-hmm,
home, remote work, different types of projects, exposure, whatever. Come up with that list and say, these are free for you. Can I count on some of this? Bake it into your offer. And then as a hiring company, um, I think one of the big no-nos is, if you're telling people white lies during the recruiting process and they work there for 3 or 6 months and they come out, that is really like it's just simply not
yes,
worth doing that. Just be straight with people. This is
yes,
where it's at, and be flexible. Let people negotiate a little bit, because if you let people win, you don't have to let them get
yes,
the whole farm, but if you let them win a little bit, they feel a hell of a lot better coming in
heck
versus
yeah.
they were strong armed into the position.
I
Those are
love
some,
that.
when I think about, yeah, think about it from those angles. Yeah.
So good, Rick. Thanks so much for sharing that. It's so helpful, I think, on so many levels. Again, for each of the just different types, whether you're a candidate, an HR leader, a hiring manager. I think these are all things, or an organization. What you're talking about is giving candidates the opportunity to win. And I just
Yeah.
think that's a great way of putting it in a time where it's just really hard to find a job. It's really hard, and that could be something of your culture that you get across by handling these negotiations. So good, so good. Um, so one question here as we kind of draw to a close, and I want to hear from you. How do you continue to sharpen your skills in negotiation? Any advice there? I think one of the things that um, a lot of times you can come into a session and get tools and frameworks, and I think it's great. Some light bulbs go off. What would you say to individuals that hear this podcast, or what's your how do you practice negotiating?
There's a there's a lot of ways to answer this, and I'll give you a couple different flavors. The first one is something that's called broad framing. Broad
Mm-hmm.
framing. This is another neuroeconomic term. It essentially means you're going to lose sometimes. You're going to win, you're going to
Mm-hmm.
lose, and not every negotiation is created equal. You don't have to be undefeated to be a good negotiator. Look at your negotiations as a portfolio, like a mutual fund manager would look at a portfolio of
Mm.
investments. Some are going to go better, some are going to go worse, some are salvage jobs. And then, like that negotiation I had with the dean, there are some negotiations you got to win. And those are the ones
That's
where the
right.
company goes out of business or you lose a ton of money or something goes wrong. That's where you're digging in. Look at your series of negotiations as broad framing and put yourself in position to negotiate. In business, there's three real easy areas to negotiate: top line, growth, sales. That's one area. Number two is your
Mm-hmm.
bottom line, cost savings, negotiating with vendors, reduced rates, reduced materials pricing. That's another spot. And the third spot is those problem areas. The one
Mm-hmm.
person who knows how to use the computer, but is really tough to work with everyone else. That's also a
Right.
negotiation. So think of it
Yes.
that way. And if you're a new manager, if you're kind of coming up the ranks and you've been really successful negotiating results or producing results, recognize that as you grow throughout your career, your negotiations transform from results to relationships in a hurry. And keeping a good
Mm.
team, a strong performing team under your belt is critical. And I'll give you a good story about this, Raul. When I was a newer manager, I had an older employee who is 3, 4 years out of retirement. He came into my office, and I don't know, maybe 20 years younger than he was. And he was very humble. And he said, Rick, I got to ask you something. I said, go ahead. He said, I'm not sure how to ask this, but every Tuesday, I would like to take an extra hour off for my lunch. He said, my father, he's in a nursing home. He's been kind of on the way down. And on every Tuesday, I like to go eat lunch with him, and it's a big deal to me. Now, the answer to that question is, can you do it? Is obviously, yeah, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
But some managers are like, no, we need you here from 8 to 5, and you can take 30 minutes. Like if you're that manager, that dude is gone.
Right.
That might be one of your
Yeah.
best engineers. That person had almost 30 years experience in the company. You know what happened after doing that? I said to him, absolutely, you can do that. Go right ahead. Don't worry about the time. If you come back a little late, I don't care. And if you want to take a
Mm-hmm.
2 days off during a week and do this, just do it. Just as long as you're getting your work done, this is fine with me. That guy
Yeah.
was working Friday nights. He was working on Saturdays. He made it fit. He like figured out his schedule, and he was one of the best employees I had because we gave him something that cost us nothing. Think of
Right.
that type of negotiation when you're in that situation, when you're dealing with people. Think of yourself in those shoes on both ends of that table. If you can give somebody the opportunity to do something in their personal life, they're going to stick around. Wow, that Raul let me
Right.
go see my dad twice a week. I'm not leaving here. This place is awesome. Yeah, I'm going to work. Do
Right.
you want me to work late? Of course I am, right? That's that's the kind of culture you want to build is you want people really excited to work for you, and you do that by giving them things that they want that don't cost anything but are really really important to them. So that's
Right.
those are styles.
I love
Yeah.
it. I love that. I love what you're saying there. I love the sentiment and the heart behind that because it's you're, you know, you're giving trust to people. You're saying, "Hey, we trust you. We trust you." And, that's something that we can give, and that's something in a relationship, that's the currency of healthy relationship is trust, isn't it? Like, and does it cost anything to give? No, it doesn't actually. And does it strengthen relationships? Yes. Um,
Yeah.
where it can cost you something is when it's broken, right? And again, I love what you're saying there. I think that's so helpful in building great culture, and also even in kind of thinking about negotiating in that sense, uh, going back to your earlier comment of being able to create opportunities for people to win. And I think this falls right in line with that. This gives, in this situation, you gave this person an opportunity to win, not only in their work life balance, but also in their personal life, which what does that do at the end of the day? It benefits the bottom line of a company. It benefits retention. It benefits the relationship. It benefits the culture. Culture can be one of those things that is um, it's more caught than it is taught, right? But it makes all the
Mhm.
difference in um, for folks that are joining a company. So absolutely love what you had to say there. um, so I guess just in wrapping up here,
And
any closing thoughts?
yeah, going back to that point, I think about culture is when as a CEO yourself,
Yeah.
when you're now we're talking to the Vistage members of the podcast.
Yes.
When you think about your role, and if you're denying your direct reports, maybe your direct report is a COO, a VP of Ops, a VP of HR, whatever. If you're denying them
Hmm.
the opportunity, they're going to deny people beneath them the opportunity, and that is a negative way to do it. Now, conversely, if you want that culture
Yep.
created from your seat downward, and it'll work. Yeah,
Absolutely. I think it's kind of a double-edged sword, isn't it? I think with that kind of thinking, because there's um it is like you're saying, it is free, but it does at the end of the day, when it's broken, it costs something, right? For both the person and for you. And I think for me, but that's just the healthiest relationships have generosity as just a it's just a natural way of expressing care and building strong relationships. And I think there's we can be even for myself as somebody that's building and scaling a company. I think one of the things that I try to do is, to me, it's all about transparency. It's all about vulnerability. And I think one of the things that I've found with vulnerability and transparency is, um, yeah, is there opportunity for people to take advantage of you? Of course. But there are also just as many opportunities for people to grow and strengthen in their relationship with you. But also, they're going to, like you said, they're going to take uh, basically the microcosm of your relationship and how you relate with them. That's going to translate into the rest of the organization. And I think one of the things that I've, being the leader of my company here for a few years now, I've come to realize that your organization takes on the characteristics, both the good and the bad, of who you are. And
yeah,
I think, that's a sobering thought. That's a sobering thought. So, and usually the things that are going to be of most benefit are going to cost you something as a leader, in the area of transparency and vulnerability. But the truth is that that's going to, um, you're going to see that come up in your organization, and multiply those characteristics, who you are and what you invest in, and the transparency and the vulnerability that you function in. If you're creating that with your leadership team, you're going to create that within the greater organization. And again, it's any good relationship, there's give and take, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a good point for negotiation skills. There's not a skill that's one size fits all. There's not a silver bullet that wins every time. And there's different situations as to how heavy you apply leverage or how soft you decide to go, or maybe you give more and take more in different situations. As long as you realize negotiation is that way and it's not a win at all costs solution, which is a short term win and a long
Oh,
term loss. Yeah, I think we talked, when I think back about our conversation today, we talked about a lot of really good topics. We talked about priming, we talked
mhm.
about the negotiation framework, 5 steps of neuroeconomics, and specifically in the HR industry of creating environments where all parties are going to win
Yeah.
and creating the culture of doing
Hmm.
that, not only at the hiring step, but throughout as managers, doing that to create your culture from the top down. And those are all powerful tools. And a lot of folks don't think of those as negotiations, but they are. Anytime you're building a relationship, you're
Hmm.
negotiating. So what I say is, I really, it's been an honor to talk with you, Raul. This has been a lot of fun, and thanks for having me. Yeah,
Totally,
thanks.
totally, Rick. It was such a pleasure to have you on. I appreciate everything you've had to say on all these topics. I think there's so much actionable insight here. I'm so happy and honored to be able to have captured this for our audience, and also I'm inspired by your story of being a 2-time cancer survivor, and I'm it's a privilege to me to be able to have someone like you that has the insights about negotiation, but has also negotiated through life and can serve as an inspiration in how you push through even difficult, adverse health circumstances and still find a way to win and give back to people. So, honestly, it's an honor and a privilege. And yeah, for those of you who want to learn more about Rick and the great work that he's doing, he is a Vistage speaker and a part of the Vistage network. So, to Vistage chairs out there, this is someone you want to have come in. Um, Companies and organizations that I'm connected with, if you have a sales team, a recruiting team, even from an HR perspective, I would highly recommend you bring Rick in as somebody that can give you actionable frameworks and tools to think about negotiation, not in just the terms that I have, which is closing deals, but just as a natural part of human relations and understanding the psychology of people and positioning and pushing business forward in a way to get results, but in the end, create relationships that are lasting. And it's not just about making a transaction. So, highly recommend you to Rick, and would also say you can find him on LinkedIn. He has his company called No One Walks Alone. He's an executive trainer. He's been doing this for the last 4 years and is a sought after speaker and trainer in the area of negotiation. So, again, Rick, thank you so much for being on, and look forward to continuing our relationship here, and all the best to you.